Hello, I'm Jeremy Rivera with CopyPress, and I'm here with Ruth Burr Reedy, and she is a powerhouse in SEO. She's been around for a long time. There's a lot of things and has worked with a lot of great teams. If you do need an excellent SEO on your team, she is in the market. So hit her up on socials. Today, we're going to be talking about what's on our mind. And we had a conversation last week. I was struggling with something, and she really has helped me on a path on something that's been really jabbing at me, and that's Google Analytics 4 implementation. So let's jump into that. I know there's some other things we were thinking about in the helpful content area and EEAT, but let's talk about GA4 first. For me, it's a bit of a prickly pear, and I've been putting it off for a long time. But I think you kind of helped therapize me a little bit. So how do you look at the transition to GA4 and not start crying?
That's it. I mean, that's a great question. Part of how I've been able to do it is that I didn't put it off until 2023. So I've had some opportunity to cope and to come to terms with it. I think so. I mean, you see all of these like polls going around, all these conversations going around, like SEOs hate GA4. And if you look at the reasons that we hate it, we hate it because it doesn't have as many features as UA. We hate it because it takes too much time to set up, and we hate it because we can't find anything. And I think all of those problems boil down to the fact that for the first time, really in 15 years, with Google Analytics, we are having to treat it as though we're onboarding a new analytics tool. And for me, that has been the helpful mindset reframing, is that, if you look at, UA was, the analogy I like to use is if it's Pokemon, UA was Charizard. It was a fully evolved, it had had 15 years to grow and grow and evolve into its iterations. It was a fully grown analytics tool. It was very robust. It had a lot of features. It had a lot of support. There's also a ton of information on the web on how to use it. Most people were not having, unless you had a brand new baby website, most people were coming into existing instances of UA that had evolved naturally over time from classic analytics and even, from Urchin. And there was still some of that remaining Urchin code from way back in the day. It was part of the data collection mechanism. So it was one tool that had grown a lot. And GA4 it's Bulbasaur. It is a different Pokemon, and it is a baby. It is a brand new baby tool. And I think that a big part of why people hate it is because we don't want to have to onboard a new analytics tool. We want it to just work. And it doesn't. You have to set it up.
Yeah, that's because with GA3, I think back, and my employer paid for me to go through the GA3 training process, and there was like a week, and there was sections and tests, and I became very familiar with the difference between sessions and page views, and this part of it is using page views, and this part is powered by sessions, and through my long consultancy, freelancing, looking at different UA profiles, I became very proficient at, hey, how did that traffic spike occur and what channel? I became very proficient and okay, well, you do this and, you unlock this segment and you can drill down to this. So I think there's certainly, a deep discomfort with the layers of familiarity that I had with GA3. I could make it sit up and big. I could separate the channels, and I could see quickly, okay, hey, these are the pages I want. Here's the channel data that I need. And I knew exactly where that was every single time. I knew what limitations there were, like you had to go through extra steps to get specific click tracking, and you had to add extra event tag. And I think the data collection, we kind of just assumed, it's always going to be poor. It's always going to be what it is and
Mhm.
just kind of exist with it. It feels like I have seen examples where, um, like at MozCon, they did some fantastic, more deeper dives into pathing and collection
Mhm.
of data that was impressive. It seems, but it seems even more frustrating for me because I don't seem to be able to get there. I don't
Yeah.
seem to be able to out of the box just navigate. Okay, it's here. I have to move the data around and tell these reports, okay, use this data here and go through this specific section to create something that's usable.
Yeah.
And it's very frustrating because I know already small business owners struggled out of the box just with Google Analytics 3. And I
Mhm.
cannot imagine that any small business owner is going to be able to use GA4 out of the box. Is that
And that I agree with that, and that is something that I've been thinking a lot about as well. The GA4 is designed to be more customizable, and if you are somebody who knows a lot about web analytics and is willing to take the time to set it up and customize it, you can get GA4 doing stuff more or less exactly the way that you want it in a way that UA couldn't quite do. Like, you could hack it to do that, and people like you and me got very good at doing that, but and now we have to learn to do it again, which it is what it is. We're SEOs. Sometimes everything we learned how to do stops working and we have to learn to do new things, and that's okay. But yeah, it's because of that there is less out of the box functionality. GA4 requires some setup, and that is something that I think Google has done themselves a little bit of a disservice. I understand and I empathize with the reasoning behind it, but a lot of their messaging and marketing around the UA to GA4 switch has been, oh, it's super easy, like complete this setup wizard, roll over this stuff. It's all automatic. If you don't do it, we'll do it for you. And I think there are a couple of problems with that. One is that there is more to it than that. So there's sort of a cognitive dissonance between what you're hearing from Google and what you're seeing when you log into the tool. And then the other is that, as somebody who has spent many years fixing people's analytics for a living, a lot of people's analytics, like UA data, was garbage.
yeah.
And there's this huge opportunity for your data to not be garbage anymore because you're forced to reset it up. But if you're just rolling over what you already had, it's garbage into garbage.
Okay.
And I think a lot of us small business owners don't really know that their data is garbage, so they're probably not concerned about that. But one of the things that you said just now that really stood out to me is you knew how to go in there and find what you wanted. And I think that that's another thing that is causing so much frustration, is that most people, not me, but most people don't just log into Google Analytics for fun, to like poke around and see what's going on. Usually when you open up GA, you are looking for a specific number, you're looking for a specific report, you have a specific data problem that you need to solve. And you're having to spend that extra time to find it and take those extra steps that you didn't have to do in UA because either it was there out of the box or because you'd already customized it. And so I think, like, part of the reality of GA4 is that you have to take some time with it when you don't have an immediate data need to customize it so that next time when you do need that data, you can just get it. But I think if you're somebody without a lot of time and without a lot of analytics expertise, I think that's a really steep learning curve.
Let's say that you're given a fresh site and we're thinking about, okay, we want to think about it as onboarding our new software. What are the
Mm-hmm.
first two things that SEOs should do to their new GA4 implementation to help them transition and see the power and
Mm-hmm.
have some hope that it's not always going to be this painful?
Well, I mean, the first thing that people should do, that many, many, many people don't ever do, is make sure that data collection is actually happening on every page. Make sure that the code is actually firing on every page. And that includes landing pages and that includes subdomains. So taking a minute to make sure that your code is implemented properly is something a lot of people don't do and didn't do with UA. So, I mean, whether that's running a crawl with a tool like Screaming Frog and looking to make sure that your GTM container is firing on every page, or if you've got it directly, you know, hard coded in there, making sure that that tag is present on every single page. You know, I also like to run a crawl and do a custom extraction and find pages that don't have the code. And often that'll be landing pages, or especially if you have something that's on a separate backend for whatever reason. And that's just, I mean, that's analytics housekeeping, regardless of what tool you're using. The second step, I'm going to cheat and make it a two-part step. I mean, what you will want to do is set up enhanced measurement and enable, you know, enhanced measurement is part of the setup wizard that GA4 tries to make you do. Not all of the steps in the setup wizard are equally important, but setting up enhanced measurement is going to do what it can to automatically detect and track various events. You know, everything in GA4 is an event. They could have called it something else because events meant something different in UA and words have meanings, but they didn't. And here we are. Everything's an event, passing parameters into GA4, turning that on. It will do its best to automatically detect things like form submissions, things like clicks on outbound links, you know, some of the basic things that most people want to track, and start collecting those as events. The second part of that I think a lot of people aren't doing is actually QAing that, not just pushing the button and saying, oh, data's coming in, it must be fine, but taking a minute to say, when we have a file download, you know, there's a specific, because there are so many different ways to build a website, and there are so many different ways to code a lot of very common actions. And I think a file download is a great example. Enhanced measurement file downloads events are basically tracking when you click on a link that's internal that ends in a file extension like .pdf, which is one way many people have file downloads. But if you have a file download where you're actually clicking on an HTML URL that then takes you to another page, especially if that page is on a subdomain or on another site entirely on a different server, and then prompting them to download from that to you is a file download, but GA4 is not going to see it that way. So you have to take the extra step to hard code it. Another example is form submissions. So GA4 has a form submit enhanced measurement event that is basically detecting the submit event, like on a JavaScript level, when a form is submitted, and that's passing data. A of all, maybe your form is in an iframe, in which case you already know that you need to set up extra steps to track that. But there are also things that can fire what looks like a form submission that aren't. So one example, and I think that Facebook has made some changes to this, but the Facebook ad tracking pixel is technically a form submission. It's submitting that third-party data via the pixel to Facebook. When people first implement enhanced measurement, a lot of them are seeing a huge inflation of form submit events because that pixel is firing as that event. It's an easy thing to fix. And that's one of the nice things about GA4 is that it's a lot easier to edit data without having to go into the hard coding of it, edit data as it's being passed into GA4, which is awesome. But you do have to do that. And if you don't check on it, then a couple of weeks later, you're like, why does my data look like this?
Got it. So is enhanced measurement like if you inherit a GA4 that somebody set up, is that something you can go into the settings and trigger and go through the wizard after the fact?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can turn on not just enhanced measurement itself, but the individual events, whether or not you want them to automatically track. You can toggle those on and off within your data stream settings. So it's easy to do, but you do have to do it.
It does seem like GA4 is much more closely married to Tag Manager than GA3. So perhaps taking some time to take a tutorial and go back over to GA3, because I know setting up, making sure appropriate triggers are configured, and you have the right measurement ID to connect this profile to this profile. Is that a situation where someone had made a GA4 instance for a backend tool or content analysis tool, and it was technically tracking, even though it's a single page application. but it was using a different container code than, the container code that the marketing site was using.
Okay.
Uh, so it seems like Google Tag Manager is something we would want to recommend brushing up your skills and trying to get that more thoroughly implemented as a complement to GA4.
Yeah, and I think that the built-in GA4 event tag in GTM is pretty good. You just would need to, especially if you're firing a lot of events into UA via GTM, make sure that a lot of times the trigger is even going to be the same. You just need to create a GA4 event to do the same thing. And that's another thing that is really grinding my gears about the Google assisted transition from UA to GA4 is that they have essentially tried to sort of shoehorn the category action label framework of event tracking, which GA4 purposely moves away from, which I think is great. By if you automatically roll over your events from UA into GA4, the event action will become the name of the event, and then it will be firing parameters called category and label that are populating with whatever values they are before. But a lot of times there's an enhanced measurement event that will track the same thing more effectively. And, category action label, like the problem with it historically has been that it's 3 parameters that could mean anything. And every single website and every single marketing team was using them differently. And often within the same website, you could watch the evolution of different naming conventions over time as various people had built events. Again, like garbage in, garbage out. You have an opportunity to not do that. But it requires setting things up and taking some thought about how you are going to fire events and what parameters you are going to collect with those events going forward. Now that, because the problem with clinging to category action label is the GA4 is going to continue to evolve away from that event tracking model. So you're just going to have to keep reverse engineering it, and you won't be able to scale and move forward as the tool evolves.
Got it. And something that you suggested, I guess, would be suggestion 3, would be treat GA4 more of a data collection engine and look to, I hate to say it, Looker instead of Google Data Studio.
And it doesn't have to be Looker. I mean, one of the great things about GA4 is that BigQuery integration is included, and you don't have to have 360 like you did in UA. So, if you enable BigQuery, especially if you don't have, you're not collecting hundreds of thousands of sessions a month, it's not that expensive. And then you can push BigQuery into whatever data visualization tool you want. It can be Looker, it can be Tableau, it can be, whatever you want to use. But I do think as of right now, I mean, and like this has always kind of been the problem with GA, is that GA was built by engineers and often has a very sort of engineering focused layout in terms of the reporting capabilities that, I think right now GA4 is really good at collecting data and less good at visualizing it. So just pushing it into a data viz tool where you can mix and match things the way that you want, I think is going to make you happier.
Yeah, I mean, it already made me happier. You gave me this advice and I asked around and I found somebody who made a Looker Studio that is the classic GA3 mode. So it's got the, behavior and layout approach of GA3. And this made me so much happier than I was with GA4 out of the box. So just knowing that, hey, you can make a Looker Studio that looks like GA3 and can do a lot of the similar things. That makes me a lot happier. And I think you're right that the data was bad in a lot of situations with Google Analytics 3. And we just kind of pushed along to get along. So
it's a huge opportunity right now. I think the more you can treat GA4 like you are onboarding a brand new analytics tool and just look at, okay, clean slate, what do we want to track? How do we want to track it? Let's get some rules in place around things like naming conventions and make sure that we're using the description field when it's available so that when we create a custom report, somebody else could look at it and know what it's supposed to do. We have this, we're being forced almost to onboard a new tool and to rethink our data and make it work for us going forward. And I think people are wasting that opportunity right now, which makes me sad. They could be really excited about a new tool, new data, new accuracy, and, you know, making your data exactly the way you want it. And instead, they're sad because it's not the way that it was before, when for a lot of people, the way that it was before was also jacked up.
Yeah.
So get excited. Yay. A new tool. It's
Yeah,
fun.
it's Dr. Strangelove learned to relax and love GA4.
That was the title of my talk at Engage this summer. Yeah.
I love it. So thinking about transitioning topics, but also, you know, about data and signals.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's been a lot of people talking about EEAT, expertise, authority, authenticness, audacity, and trust. Uh,
EEAT.
yeah, adding all of these things, but um, those type of concepts that SEOs have been talking about in sessions, how does that actually translate into usable signals, editable signals, physical changes? You can go to your site and say, okay, I want to change this thing on my site that's going to help Google understand this part of it,
Mm-hmm.
and or not do something specifically that is likely to fall foul of, you know, helpful content parameters. So for me, a lot of the discussion around helpful content uh, has kind of been overblown
Mm-hmm.
of expectation of what who Google is going to be targeting with that. And I've been
Mm-hmm.
very closely watching, you know, what Lily Ray is discovering and trying to spot, okay, the update came out here
Mm-hmm.
and we think these guys, you know, crashed right after, and then kind of analyzing post-mortem, what were the similarities there. So what's your take on helpful content update, and what do you think it breaks down to as far as actionables that we can really step away from, you know, oh, I need to be more authoritative,
Mm-hmm.
not super
Right.
actionable,
Yeah. I
but
mean, like it's the new just build good content. Okay, what is good content? What does that mean? How do you
right,
know?
yeah.
So
So
for me, SEO has always, and especially when it comes to interpreting what Google says, it comes down to understanding the human readable quality signals that or human readable traits of quality that Google is trying to exhibit to its end users, and then figuring out, or at least hypothesizing about, what the machine readable equivalents of those human readable quality signals are. And I think that's part of the reason why conversations around EEAT can kind of go around in circles or not be super actionable, because EEAT is a way of thinking about all of this for people, for person brains, for marketers and content creators who are people, but the algorithm is machine. And, you know, algorithmically, there's no reason for Google to try to build a human brain machine wise, because human brains are not actually very efficient. And
right,
the way that, and which is fine, but the way that Google, and when I say Google, you know, it's really like 100, the algorithm is many algorithms stacked on top of each other in a giant trench coat. The way that they collect and process and understand and return information is looking for, you know, wherever possible, they want to build that in. They don't want manual processes. They want algorithmically to build it in. And so I think that this is something that I think EEAT and the rise of machine learning generated content are inextricable. You know, originally Google said no machine learning generated content, then they walked that way back. I think it is because it's difficult to say with confidence that you can at an algorithmic level detect whether or not something was created using AI. It's not AI, it's machine learning, whatever.
yes.
I'm a curmudgeon about this, but
No,
AI
me
is the
too, me
convenient
too.
shorthand. I don't think that they can do that with enough confidence to come out and say, don't do this. Instead, and I think this is smart, they're emphasizing quality signals that are difficult to do with language learning models. And I think that that's part of where the experience point comes in. So thinking about machine readable signals that you actually did this, that you actually created the content, I mean, part of what's interesting for that to me is that people have been creating content that they knew nothing about for years and years. There are many, many, many content marketing agencies in the world. When I was 22, I wrote a blog about how to find and win contracts with the federal government. Do I know about that? No, I don't, but I can do some research and create some content about it. And so can a predictive content tool. So looking for the things that not everybody is saying, you can do that on a machine detectable basis if you are using tools to do entity extraction at scale, looking at what the ranking pages are for a given term or topic set, and then extracting the common entities, but also taking a look at like the Wikidata entry around those same topics. What are the entities that are not commonly discussed that you can add in? Taking a look at who is creating the content. So I think, and this has been true for several years now, since EAT, before the extra E was added, but I think even more now, treating your content producers like brand terms, treating your people like your product. So not just saying, here's this person, here's their bio. Anybody can say anything about themselves. It's very easy, but how are you building machine readable citations across the web around this person? I think we're going to see a rise in sort of a new wave of SEO-based influencer marketing as people who do have demonstrable real-world expertise that can be shown with citations across the web. And I think links, again, then become important in a different way. They become important almost more as an expertise signal rather than a signal in and of themselves.
So slowing that down and kind of breaking it apart, that turns into like one, making sure, because I just talked to somebody and like they had a little box and said, Michelle Wolf, PhD, and learn more about her here. And that was in the text. And then I looked at the code and realized that they had a separate schema text that had a totally different name. And I figured out that 3/4 of their, 3,000 articles, like 1,000 articles were attributed to one person, and she was no longer with the company. And so because they hadn't gone into WordPress and changed the author internally, and they had just added, they'd done special dynamic coding to put the PhD, they intentionally tried to up their EEAT and show expertise and say, hey, this is because it's a YML, your money or your life niche. So they knew it was important, but they put it into the text, but they were sending two signals for that same author for that. So one would be making sure that you have one signal for your author, and two, that you're sending, have some aspect of it that's connecting to that social graph, have links to their LinkedIn profile, have links to their personal site, have a schema markup saying, hey, this is the same entity.
Yeah, I think same as markup around your authors, especially around their other citations. And I think with YMYL, a lot of medical doctors have pages on, Find My Doctor or Physicians Today or whatever it is, building those citations in. But yeah, I mean, so the thing with schema is I think that so many people still see semantic markup as a page by page or a page template by page template activity where they're like, okay, this is a blog post, so I'm going to implement blog posting markup. But I think the real opportunity with semantic markup now is to interrelate those different pieces of markup and be linking them to each other via internal linking and via IDs and other things like that can help you create a knowledge graph within your own website that is explicitly linking these pieces of knowledge together to make them more machine discoverable, and then pulling in data from other places in the web to demonstrate this is a real person and here's how you can tell, here's their digital footprint. That's harder and more expensive to fake. But taking the time to connect it all together, I think is another missed opportunity.
And I think that's another actionable piece of the puzzle, is to stop thinking about your content as just a written item, but thinking about, the aspects of marketing that, traditionally in the 70s, you would kind of, as a company, want to get behind a particular person and do thought leadership and
Yeah.
have an industry figure. And that's
Mhm.
not something where you can just publish things on a site and now you're an authority. That person needs to be out there in different ways.
Mhm.
And so, pushing, instead of these really exhausting conversations about, okay, we need to do link building because we need link authority to be sent. And then the business owners will, well, how do we measure that? Well, there's this domain ranking metric that kind of sort of works. And then the
There's three
business owners
different
are like,
ones and they all
oh
say
yeah,
different things.
I want a DR 75 and I'll pay $5,000 for $500 for, DR 75 links. And you're like, whoa, wait. We need to tell Google that we're relevant. We need
Mhm.
to get out there in some way. So it's almost like rehashing and changing the link building concept into authority building, and what are the processes of building those authority signals, and if we remind people, okay, treat your authors like a resource that you can build up, not just by attaching pieces of content, but by getting their pieces of content on other sites.
Mhm.
Even if the link isn't necessary, you're not getting a link back to the site, that person building up their authority, that transfers it in. And
Yeah.
that's the change of mind of
And
thinking
that
of
to me,
person.
I love that you brought up the 70s because to me, I think one thing that I have had success talking with business owners about is that link building at its heart is it's a set of disciplines that has its roots in PR and brand building and in practices that are older than the internet. And I think too often we divorce links from that. But if what you're doing is building a brand, if what you're doing is doing actual, not just, spraying out your press release to a million websites, but real public relationships where you're doing outreach and you're promoting your business and you're promoting the people behind your business, especially in any kind of services based business, including most, medical sites and practices, which is a YMYL category, the more that you are taking the time to build that brand on the web and then just taking an extra moment to make sure that that's happening, you're getting those citations, that's happening in a machine readable way. A lot of times people are already doing those activities, but they don't think about them as link building, but they are. And you just
Yeah,
have to, it's a mindset change more than anything else.
absolutely love it. Thanks so much for your time today. Is
Yeah.
there any last takeaway on GA4 or on thinking about how you change link building to kind of fit into this new schema of how to approach authority, really?
I mean, one of those is a way bigger question than the other. With GA4, I would say let go of UA. It's gone. It's okay to feel sad about that. Let it go. Breathe it out. Namaste. We release it back into the world. It no longer sparks joy, and that's okay. We honor the service that it did for us, and then we release it into the world, and really take a minute to think about onboarding GA4 as a new tool, even if you've been using it for a while. Set aside 4 hours. That's my challenge to anybody who watches this. Set aside one afternoon, half a day, 4 hours to look at your data collection, to think about what you want to report on and how you want to label that information. Just set it up, build some custom reports, build some dashboards. It really doesn't take that much time, but it takes time and it
Right.
takes intention. And the reason that you're annoyed is because you're only logging into GA4 when you need something else. If you think of it as because if it was not GA, if you were onboarding some other third-party analytics tool, you would have to take the time to onboard it. You would have to take the time to define what you're collecting and then make sure it's collecting and reporting the way that you want to. If you can view it through that lens and do that setup one time, you'll be so much less irritated with it every other time you do it. And I know you don't want to spend the time, but you can spend 4 hours once and be less annoyed forever, or you can keep being annoyed. And that's a personal choice that you have to make for yourself. I know which one I would pick.
Okay. Thank you.
And then, yeah, I think with authority building, like really take the time to, I mean, one of the things that I think is great about machine learning models is you have an opportunity, and a lot of content tools are incorporating this in, to use a tool to say, hey, does this piece of content say what I think it says? Can you tell who wrote this? You know, use those tools to figure out how easy it is to tell who wrote your content and what they do and who they are. And if you have that expertise, then look at whether or not Google can tell. And if not, think of it as it's just brand building. You're just building a brand, but you're doing it around a person instead of around a product. And you're a marketer. You know how to market. You just have to start thinking about your experts as part of your offering and market them as such.
I love that. Thanks so much for your time, Ruth. And
Yeah,
anybody who's watching this, reach out to her. She can be on your team, in your team, lead your team, whether you're a brand or agency. She's available.
I appreciate it. It was great chatting with you today.